Hey there, Michelle Trieste here, and I'm passionate about supporting everyone who feels overwhelmed and isolated, and you need the support for your growth. So, we are here to bring someone that can help us along and just someone who's very special, where she has overcome a lot of adversity and redefined her path in life. And I'm very happy to have her here with us. So I'm introducing Janna
Janna. Yep.
Willoughby, Janna Willoughby-Lohr, and she is the owner of Papercraft Miracles. And in a world that uses about 70 million tons of paper annually, it's important that we have people like Janna who can be creative enough to take something and consider sustainable alternatives and make beautiful things. So thank you, Janna. And your story is so powerful. We met in a storytelling group, and your story, when you shared just your brave background in your family life, which I'll let you explain it yourself, but just the beauty that came out of a loss. So could you share with us just how Papercraft Miracles came to be about, and that personal experience that shaped your business?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So I always wanted to be an artist, and I originally went away to college to a school called Warren Wilson College to be a poet. I was there on a scholarship for poetry. And as soon as I got there, I looked at the course catalog to pick out what I was going to take, and I saw that they had classes in paper making and bookbinding. And I didn't even know that you could take classes in that or that it was a thing. And I had always done collaging and rubber stamping and like paper crafty things and decorated my own journals or whatever. Like my whole life, my mom did that kind of stuff too. And so
Oh,
I was really pumped and went and signed up for as many of those as I could get into. And I took all these really weird, interesting classes. I took a class about Gandhi and searching for truth and all these weird things. And
wow.
in my freshman year, I went and met with my advisor and I said, "Hey, these are all the classes I took. What major am I working towards?" And he said, "Those are all electives, so nothing."
That's great, man. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. But I was there on a scholarship, and I said to him, "I'm like, look, like, what am I supposed to do now? I can't have wasted an entire year of school. There's no way. What am I supposed to do?" And he was really awesome. He could have said, "Oh, whatever, just go major in communications like everybody else,"
Right.
but he didn't. And he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to be an artist, and I don't want to be broke. How do I do that?" And he said, "You should do that as your major." And I looked at him like he was insane. Like, if that was a major, everyone would take it. Um,
Wow.
but he said, "No, we have this major called integrative studies. You already know what you want to do. Most people don't know by the time they're 45 what they want to do. And you're 19, you know exactly what you want to do. You should spend the rest of your 4 years figuring out how to do that. So go do it."
Never
And
heard of that. Integrative studies. I've never heard of that.
yeah,
Interesting.
so I made up my own major and I integrated entrepreneurial business and creative art together as one course of study. And I spent the remainder of my 3 years of school learning how to sell art and how to run a business selling art. And obviously took all these entrepreneurship classes, and I took all the art classes mainly in book arts and fiber arts and things like that. I did some
Right.
fabric classes too. And I did a lot of classes about women artists. Every class that had about women's artistic vision and things like that, I took
Oh,
those.
cool.
But in general, I kind of steered out of the classes that were required for art majors because most of those were a lot of art history.
Oh,
Um,
boring. Sorry.
right? Not necessarily all boring, but like learning about dudes, And I was like, they're not teaching me how to sell art,
Yeah, yeah,
like
well, they were the ones writing the books back then, back in the day,
exactly.
so
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah,
still,
yeah.
still. And I went and I talked to one of the teachers who was like heading up the art department, and I said, "Do you have any classes that are geared toward helping artists create a career?" And they said, we have 1-2 credit class for seniors in art majors only. That's business for artists. And I said, well, can I take that class as part of my integrative studies? And they said, no, because it's only for art majors. And I was like, well, can you give me like the Cliff's Notes version of what you teach in that class so that I know whether or not it's, it's for me. And or if I could learn what you have to teach. And they said that they help artists catalog their work and then pitch to galleries. And pretty much that's it. It was like, here's how to write down all the paintings you made on index cards and put them in a box and then, take photos of them and send them out to galleries to get representation. And I was like, well, what if you want to do commercial art or commission-based work? And they were like, oh, no, we have nothing for that. I'm like, okay, I'm getting out of this.
Wow.
So I kept thinking about like, what do I really need to know to be able to sell art to people by myself without a gallery? Because I'm not going to do that kind of art.
Right.
I loved making art that people interact with. People have to touch it. I help people make art that they see in their mind and don't know how to make and things like that. So I figured out pretty quickly that the glue that holds the two parts of art and business together is social work, working with people. So I took a bunch of those classes. And by the time I graduated, I had a really crappy Angel Fire website. This is dating myself. It was a very long time ago. I had a little print catalog and some business cards. And so by the time and a business plan. And by the time I graduated, I had those.
Most people.
But it was definitely not as easy as like, oh, I picked these classes, I did it. So the main reason I created Papercraft Miracles is during my junior year of school, 3 weeks into the school year, my mom passed away on Friday the 13th in the middle of a crazy rainstorm. And it was sudden, but also not something I hadn't ever thought about because my mom had been sick for a while. She had congestive heart failure for a long time. And in many ways, I was like her parent as a teenager. And I remember when I was maybe 14 thinking that she probably would never meet kids that I had unless I had them like in high school.
Oh, wow. So 14 and you were graduating.
Yeah, I just had this feeling that she wasn't taking good care of herself. She'd already had one stroke and had congestive heart failure. She smoked a lot. She was not good at adulting. She was not taking care of herself, didn't have health insurance, all those things, pre-Obama, of course. So she passed away. Oh, go ahead.
So do you think that helped your mindset, that you were actually looking and being proactive about taking your art and turning it and making sure you had an ability to turn it into business? I mean, such a young age to be thinking that way. And it sounds like you've been dealing with that possibility since you were 14. Wow.
I mean, at the time, I didn't really say like, oh, what's going to be my paycheck, right? So like that part didn't really seem real about it, but it was like both of my parents loved to do creative things and never found out any way to make any money doing that at all, and had to do other things. And every week on Monday, they'd be like, oh, I gotta go to work, blah, 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 blah. Don't get to do the things I love. So that was my main impetus. I was like, I want to be able to do something creative with whatever job I have. And if I learn how to do stuff with business and I can sell art on the side, then hopefully I'll be able to get a job. It's somewhere creative. That's kind of where I was at the time. And then she passed away, which sucked, of course. But my brother and I inherited our house, which was here in Buffalo. But I was going to school in North Carolina, 900 miles away. And she didn't have a will and she had no money. So all in the middle of, my first semester of my junior year of school, I'm also trying to deal with my mom's estate and all this paperwork and paying for lawyers, and we had no money and the house was falling apart and my brother's there and we're trying to make sure that all the bills kept getting paid so they wouldn't take the house before we could, settle everything out. It was terrible. And then I went home for winter break and we dealt with a bunch of stuff and, seemed like I had kind of processed some things and sort of felt like I was starting a new semester in a new headspace. And I had been starting to make some art about my mom and did a lot of writing about my mom and things like that, and had
Mm,
processed some grief. I
right.
get back to school for the next semester. It was Saturday afternoon when I got back. 4 o'clock in the morning on Saturday night, my dorm caught on fire and burnt to the ground
Wow.
with all my stuff in it while
Oh,
I was in it. And yeah, Sunday would have been my mom's 55th birthday. So while
mm,
it wasn't like the next birthday she would have had after she died, all of my stuff literally burnt up in front of my eyes the day before the semester was supposed to start.
wow. Ugh.
So not only, I mean, obviously all my clothes, all that kind of stuff, but I mean, all my journals from my whole entire life, all
Ugh,
the artwork
that's
that I'd
heartbreaking.
made, all the work
Heart
that I'd done for my major, all my books, all of my
heartbreaking because
instruments.
and you are such a beautiful writer. I have to tell you, when you write things, I just love reading it slowly. You just have a and I now I see why, because you journaled along your life, and I'm so sorry to hear that they were lost, but you have a gift there too.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, that's why I
Mhm.
initially went to school in the first place, was to write. And it's part of what I'm doing right now. I'll talk about it later. I'm writing a book.
Oh,
Um,
oh.
but at the
Now
time, like after all the, I kept thinking, I was like, really? My mom dies on Friday the 13th, and then my dorm burns up on her birthday.
oh, I can't imagine how you picture yourself up from that. Y
It was intense, and it is also at the same time, I was also going through, like, this massive heartbreak, where someone I love very much joined the military, and the same day that the dorm burnt was the day that
I
he
see.
went away into the active duty military for the rest of our lives, and we were like, "We can't be together because I wanna be an artist, and I don't wanna be a military wife, and you wanna do that and fly planes, so we'll stay friends, and I'll see you later." So,
Oh,
like, he was on a plane, and this is all, like, before cell phones or anything like that, so, like, I couldn't even call and be like, "You'll never guess what happened on the day that you left."
wow.
Seriously.
Uh,
Um,
wow, for
and
you to
then
take all that in and handle it, I just give you so much credit. I mean, such a young person to be making these kind of intense, soul-searching decisions, like, I
well,
don't think I
you
made anything kind of those decisions till much later in life. I give you so much
most
credit.
don't, because 'cause they're not forced to, right? And that's the thing, is like when you go through something difficult, somebody always says, "Oh my god, I couldn't handle that. I could never
Right,
deal with that," or
right,
whatever. "How did you deal with that?" And
right,
people
yeah.
always say that, and especially when you talk about losing your things in a fire, right? Because people are like, "Oh my god, your stuff. Oh my god, your stuff. I could never. I could never." And I lived in a hoarder house with my mom, who was a heavy smoker. So like I thought about losing all my stuff in a fire almost every day of my life until
Oh,
I went away to college, when I could keep my own room perfectly, spotlessly OCD clean, because I had never been able to do that before.
wow.
And so 3 days after the fire, I mean, the first couple days we were very stunned and just like, oh my God, did that just happen to us? Um, and on the third day, I looked at my roommate and I said, dude, all of our shit burnt up.
Wow. The
And
reality hits.
we just started laughing, like totally insane people, like rolling around on the ground laughing, because I had been thinking for the last 3 days, like, okay, it would have been my mom's 55th birthday.
Yeah.
5 has always been my lucky number. And I kept thinking, like, all right, there's a reason this happened on her birthday, right? Like, I
Mm,
don't want to be that person who's like, everything happens for a reason, right? But like in my life, if things happen and there are particular dates or numbers or whatever, like those things are there for a reason for me. And I
yeah.
was like, there's a reason that this happened on her birthday.
Yeah, yep, kicking you a different direction.
And I kept
Get
thinking,
off the pity potty.
yeah, it's like if she would have been 55, so that's 2 lucky things. One was really super easy to notice. Me and everyone else who was in that building in the middle of the night, drunk college students, right? Every single person got out alive, which is
Oh,
amazing.
good.
Amazing, right?
Huge. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, there's only one person who got injured and it wasn't life-threatening, which is a story for another day. And the other thing, I just kept thinking, like, what is that other thing. Like, what am I supposed to know about this? What is the luck in my life from this happening?
Mm.
And on that third day, it hit me that all of my stuff burnt up. And I was like, living in this hoarder house with my mom, totally bogged down by all of her stuff.
Mm.
I mean, we had 10,000 books in our one floor apartment.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't even know that we had hardwood floors until I cleaned it up after she died,
Mm.
because I had never saw them. They were always covered in papers and books and whatever. Whatever came into the house. And I remember she used to yell at me for trying to clean because she couldn't find where her stuff was if I moved it around and things like that. So,
Right.
you know, it just hit me that I was like, she's sending me something she didn't learn in her life, that
Mm.
you don't need any of that stuff. Not
Mhm.
one thing in that room did I need to survive. None. I had everything she gave me in the last 5 years of her life in that room. And I didn't need any of those either.
What a lesson.
Would it have been nice to still have my ID? Yeah, that really would have been helpful. But even that, I didn't need it. I didn't need it. And it just
Right.
showed me that when you're 20 years old, it's as old as I was at the time, you measure success by the things that you have, right? Because you don't have a career, you don't have kids, usually you're not married, you haven't bought a house, you don't typically have an apartment either, you usually live on the college campus, like your things in
Yeah.
your
You're
tiny little
little.
room, right? Those define who you are.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I had realized once they were gone that I had been relying on my things and my journals and the things I had written and my poems and all those things, physical things, to define who I was as a person.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? You don't need any of them. None. You only need 5 things in this world to survive. You need food, you need water, you need shelter, you need someone that loves you, and something that drives you. And that's it. Everything else is cake. It's
Right.
dessert. It's extra. And so from 20 years old, I couldn't see any other way to be alive. It was like, if you had things, they're nice. It's great to have things. Sure,
Right.
have 'em.
Yep.
But, things come and things go. And when you don't have things, people
Mm.
feel bad and say, "Oh, you don't have things? Here's things." And then those things show up. Okay. Like,
Right, right,
what
right. It reminds me of the Buddhist practice where they take the sand and they make these beautiful designs. I'm
Mhm.
sure you know. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
at the end, they blow the whole design. They just blow it. And then I think they drop the sand in in a lake or river or something, and just to remind us of the impermanence of life. That's
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
that's a beautiful example, real life example of moving through that.
yeah,
So thank you.
you could tell people all day that your stuff doesn't matter, right? Like, I could tell you all day. Um, but really feeling that with every cell that you have, that you don't need those things. If you still
Believing
have
it.
your life keeping you warm, that's it. And
Yep,
so
yep.
I started making all of these artist books. For all of you who don't know what artist books are, it's my favorite kind of art form. But the form and the design and the materials and the words and the illustrations and how you interact with it and how it sounds when you open it and how it feels when you open it and things like that all work together to be one greater concept or a bigger idea.
So
Uh,
is that like a craft book?
I love it because it pushes the envelope of what you could consider a book.
Do you have one
I've
there?
made artist books that are in a box. I've made artist books that are accordion books that have pockets that have pages that come out of the pockets.
Mm.
I made a book um, that opens like this, and you flip it over, and then it opens like this. And I
Oh.
ended up making this whole series of books about my relationship with my mom and dealing
Mm,
with grief and dealing with trauma and learning to value the things that are really important in life, which is people, relationships with people,
mm.
and interacting with people and helping people see how fucking beautiful it is to just be able to just be able. Because there's so many people that are not able to enjoy being alive. And so I just started making all of this art about that. and those topics and those subjects. And of course, at the time, I didn't know to call it grief and trauma. I was just like, I'm dealing with some crap, so I'm gonna make some art.
And different types. Sometimes people just think grief is about when someone dies. It's like, no, there's so many things over our lives that we lose or grieve. And so you have a beautiful example of the different ways we can grieve at all different ages that help us to adapt and
Yeah.
create.
And it doesn't ever go away. For anyone wondering out there, I had this amazing professor, John Bowman. Shout out to John Bowman out there if he's listening. But he was my Buddhism in America teacher.
Oh, interesting.
Gave me my one religion credit that I needed. I took that class. So yes, I definitely know about the monks and the sand mandalas. We learned a lot about that. But I asked him, because he had lost his parents at that point in his life. And I said, I lost my mom, and I actually stayed at school for a week after that before I went home for her memorial, because I was supposed to go to this amazing poetry festival in New Jersey. And she was so excited I was going to get to go to that and see Lucille Clifton like read poetry in person and all these things. And she was like, oh my God, you get to go. And then she died. And I was like, I have to go. She's going to be so pissed if I go home and wallow and like don't get to go have this experience, like life is so short. So in that week where I was kind of floating around in a haze, like not going to lie, I smoked a lot of pot because this is like a long time ago. And it was like, what do you do in that situation to, like continue going to class? Like, I guess you do that. But I went and I asked him and I said, this feeling, like, does it ever go away? And he said, no, but you get used to the way that it sucks.
Yeah.
And just like every year of my life, I'm like, dude, you're so right. Like,
yeah.
Some people say you grow around it, and that like grief is like a box with a ball in it. And when someone first dies or when something first happens, some kind of trauma happens, like the ball is huge and it bonks into the sides of the box all the time. And, the longer you sit with it, the ball doesn't get smaller, but the box gets bigger. And so it doesn't it doesn't always still bonk into the walls the same way. But when it does, it surprises the hell out of you because you're like, oh, that's right. That is still there.
Right. That's a beautiful way of seeing it. So the box changes. Interesting. And how, talking about a box, how did you choose to get involved with recycled materials? How did that, tell me about that shift. Where did you start, and then how did you involve that?
I used to do it as a kid all the time. Because I remember I'm a child of the 80s. So like the 80s and 90s. And it was like, oh my God, the giant pandas are all going to die and it's all our fault, that's my childhood. It's like learning about, endangered animals and that kind of thing, and the ozone layer, and you can't use hairspray. And, it was, that was what we learned in science class at school.
Right.
And so I was, partially because I wanted to, be that kid that was going to change the world, but also because my mom was broke as hell. So I was like, we can't go to the art supply store and buy expensive art supplies all the time. We don't have that money. My mom made like $12,000 a year and somehow had a house, 2 kids, and a car. I don't know how she did it. Lots of credit card debt and a second mortgage, but we were not going out and buying a lot of supplies. So that's partly why I love doing paper crafting, because I was like, oh, we have all these magazines when I go to the doctor or whatever. And I say, can I have this, and take it home? And, somebody always had old National Geographics or things like that. So I was always like taking all these print materials and cutting them up and making new things out of them. And I would take the box from the cereal and cut it apart and put a collage on it, and then find some paper at my mom's office, in the scrap recycle bin or whatever. And I would fold it in half and I would make my own little journals out of it and things like that. So it was definitely like, I started doing it as creative problem solving as a kid out of necessity. It was like, what can we make art out of that isn't a normal thing to make art out of, because we got nothing else. And I remember I used to, I made a whole outfit out of plastic bags when I was maybe like 8. The shirt is easy. You just cut the bottom off, put it on. It's already got straps. It was great. But yeah, it had like underwear, and then it had shorts, and I had some shoes, and it was all made out of plastic bags that we got from going to buy groceries and stuff like that. And so I was always like trying to find ways that I could use stuff that was around me to make art. And so when I started my business, which I called Papercraft Miracles because it saved me when I literally had nothing, um, I also kind of out of necessity, it was like, well, if I want to keep, my costs low as a business owner, I knew enough from my business courses that you want to make sure that your material costs are as low as possible. And I was like, if you're making art out of other people's trash, then your material cost is zero, right? So
Right, right,
um, I was always trying to find ways that I could use materials that I could source for free. Because of that, it keeps your costs low.
yeah,
And then realizing like, oh, well, this is also, not only is it good for business on the bottom line, right? But it's good for business because it's good for the world.
right,
And when you're making art, the type of art, especially that I do, which involves, you know, getting people to know that it's a thing and then wanting to buy it because they don't know that it even exists before you tell them. Uh,
right.
Having a good story is great. And so being able to really walk the walk and saying, like, we care about people, we care about the environment, and we put those things ahead of profits always. And
Right.
then doing everything that we can to say, what's a way we could do this better? What's a way we can do this with less waste? How can we use the waste material that we create to make something else? Um, what else can we do out of this? What materials are out there in abundance that are really difficult to get rid of in other means? How can we use those? And it's, for me, I think it's fun. It's so much fun just
Yeah,
to,
it's so creative, and I think it's a mindset that people forget these days. I hate to say it, but we used to, even when I was a kid, we would look for things and look to reuse them. Just because, like you said, I mean, I too wasn't given everything, so I had to be resourceful.
Mhm.
But it teaches you when you don't have and you have to figure it out, it teaches you how to do that later in life and problem solve, in
Exactly.
every different area, so it's a good thing. So when you first started what were some of the first things that you started to recycle in the business?
I mean, the first
What
thing we started
what
recycling was,
materials?
um, I mean, before I had any staff or anything like that, when it was still like, oh, I'm making art in the, like the corner of the attic in my house before I even bought this building, um,
Right.
I was still doing, like, even teaching workshops about making journals out of cereal boxes and things like that. So, uh,
Oh, okay.
swapping out that for chipboard and making books and things like that. And using scrap paper and collage. I still love doing collages and vision boards and stuff like that. My assistant is like, girl, you with the magazines. I'm like, but we could use that. It's got pictures of this or words that look cool in it. Like, you never know when you might need, I try not to be like, you never know when you might need that, but like, you never know when you might use that. So people always say, like, who's got magazines? I'm like, I do. I got magazines.
The
Um,
hairdresser.
so yeah, I'm using magazines, and then I started doing paper making after I quit my job, which was like many years after graduating college. Not to burst anyone's, hey, I'm going to graduate college and immediately be a full time artist bubble. It's real
So
art.
you worked first
I did.
somewhere else?
I did. I worked at a gas station for 5 years as the assistant manager,
Okay.
um, which actually was great. I had
You
amazing
learn a
health
lot.
benefits, and I learned a ton about running a business in ways that you would not be able to learn while going to school.
Mhm.
Um, and then I worked at another company editing photos for their online
Mm.
store, product photos, for 5 years after that. So I
Mhm,
learned how to
mhm,
take
mhm.
photos and edit photos and prepare them to be listed on on the internet and have them all
Oh,
in the right
wow.
format. So I got to
That's
do
a
all of
great
that
skill.
before I
Yeah.
was like, building my own website. So I was like, oh, I know all of that stuff now. But while I was doing all those things, my husband and I bought this building that we're in right now, which is super beautiful. You can't see the whole thing, but you know,
From
go
the
on.
Google Zoom, I could see, and I could see,
Yes,
like, you
you
could
can
see
see
on
a picture
top, you have the
our solar panels on the
you
roof
have
that I put
solar
up.
panels, very cool.
But yeah, so we bought this building and it was terrifying to be like, here's every dollar that we have. But we walked in the door and I said, babe, I don't care if we never eat again. This is the place. Like, we got to make this happen. We got to figure it out. So we bought the building. And then 2 years later, I got pregnant with our first baby, very much intentionally.
Right.
And after I had him, I, asked my job, I said, could I, I'm editing photos. It was 100% something I could do at home. I've been doing it for 5 years already. Like, they knew how many to expect me to do in 8 hours worth of work, right?
Yeah.
But I asked if I could work from home, and they tried it for a couple months. And the other people I worked with complained. They were complaining that I got to work at home and they didn't, or whatever.
Jealousy, yeah.
And that whenever I worked 2 days at home and 2 days in the office. And the 2 days that I was in the office, I also had to pump milk 3 times during the day, so I didn't lose my milk. And they were like, well, when she's at the office, she's never at her desk. I'm like, yeah, because I'm in a closet with my top off next to the boss's wine stash. It's great. I just really want to be there all day. That's my favorite,
Yeah.
So because other people were complaining, not because I wasn't getting the right amount of work done, but because of that, I mean, thank God for them. I think about it now, but they said you have to either come back full time into the office or figure something else out. And I said,
Wow.
well, you don't pay me enough to cover healthcare and daycare, so I guess I'm going to figure something else out.
Good for you.
And this is right at the end of the year, and we had this huge mortgage, which we had only paid for 2 years at this point. And it's a commercial mortgage, so we had to pay it off within 5 years. And I was like,
Jeez.
okay, hey, hubby, what should we do now? And he said, we'll figure it out. Just stay home and do your book thing. That's what he said. Do your book thing. Because at the time, I was mostly just making books because I didn't have a lot of equipment and stuff like that.
What
And
a great team.
yeah, I mean, he
Yeah,
was like,
great.
if you made more money, then, I'd stay home, but you don't. So, you just do your thing and we'll figure it out. Certainly could have used some more conversations of what we were both expecting from that situation, but that is hindsight at this point. So yeah, I quit my job and I ended up, I was like, oh my God, this is the first time, since my mom died that I have someone else that I'm reliant on like that, that I'm not required to get up to an alarm clock and go to a job to pay the bills to support myself right now. And I struggled really hard with being able to trust that he wasn't going to be resentful. And to trust that it was going to be safe for me to do that as the kid of a single mom who never had enough money. And that was really tough for me. And so I immediately was like, oh my God, I've been wanting to really put my whole being into doing this business since I was 19 years old. I have a business plan sitting on my shelf that has been on my shelf since 2004, and it's 2016. It's like 12 years of making art on the side, and I was at the point where it was a business. I had a sales tax ID. I was collecting sales tax and tracking my orders and tracking my
right.
I was doing that, but it was very, very small. Like because I had a full-time job and a kid before that, so it was I was making a couple grand a year. It was enough where I could write off my art supplies, which is great. And so right after I quit my job, I was like, I'm gonna really do it. I'm going to really do it. I'm not going to try and get another job when my kid goes to school in 5 years. I was like, I'm doing this.
Right.
I'm doing it. And I hired a friend of mine who also is a business owner and fellow mama to help rebrand my company and help me get a Squarespace website started. Because when I first had my first website, you couldn't buy anything online. And I'd never had time or money or effort to rebuild it since then. So I'd been like selling stuff on Facebook and going to do vendor sales. So I didn't actually have like a good website that had all the stuff on it that I wanted to have on it.
This is before DIY or whatever it is.
Yeah, right. I mean, you couldn't. Squarespace was a thing, and I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know how to set it up. But as soon as she helped me, do with the rebranding and got it, new logo, new colors, did the whole brand style sheet, all that kind of stuff. And it's funny because obviously I'm a designer, right? So you'd think that I would have been able to like come up with my own logo and do my own thing like that. But this is like
zoom out a lot of
I
times.
have to put this out there because there's so many people who start businesses, especially creatives, who think, oh, I'm creative. I could do all of it. I could do all of it myself. And there is so much benefit in getting a perspective, a point of view from someone else. Ideally, your target market, right? And I, after like one conversation with her, and she said, so what colors are you thinking? What colors do you lean towards? And I was like, well, I really like black and like dark purple and stuff like that. And she was like, well, you got to think of like, who's your market? What are you trying to get into? What do you want to do most? And at the time I was like, well, I would love to be able to do like more weddings and events and stuff like that. And she goes, which events are black? And it just never occurred to me.
Funerals.
Funerals and Halloween. That's it.
There you go.
Thinking about, weddings and celebrations and graduations and all those things. All those things are like, white background,
right.
make the product stand out. And she was like, light, bright, you want to invite people in. And so we changed the whole branding. And now if you look around my office, if you look around my website, everything, it's all on a bright white background and the products speak for themselves, right? The products are all bright and everything is in, on the bright white. And it lights everything up and it changes the whole mood. And she changed my business by doing that. And as soon as I did it, built my website on Squarespace, got into doing that kind of stuff, and started growing my Instagram at home with baby. And I was like, this is what it's like to be a mompreneur. I'm learning, and so are you. And every day I was posting like videos of my kid, like pulling out an entire box full of tissues in my office while I tried to do something. And I was like, some days you teach your kid how to use a spoon, and some days you really get a lot of stuff done.
Yeah. That's the way it rolls.
They're all a win. And I spent a lot of time doing that kind of stuff. And then the first, I think it was like 2 months after I quit my job, I was scrolling on Instagram and looking for hashtag papermaking while I was up nursing my baby in the middle of the night. So I didn't want to fall asleep and drop him on the floor. So that's when I would do all my market research, was while I was nursing in the middle of the night because I was awake. And I looked up hashtag papermaking and I saw somebody's post that said papermaking equipment available with an email address. And mind you, like I had been wanting to have a papermaking studio since I was in college, but like buying all the equipment brand new is like, $30,000. And I was like, I ain't gonna have $30,000, right? Like that's
I've never even heard that term before. Paper making, a machine to make flat regular paper.
So the machine that you like that you really need if you're gonna do it more than like hobby, it's called a Hollander beater, and it turns like raw material into pulp with water.
Okay.
And so like that machine, and then you need to have like the molds and the decals and like what are called vats, which is kind of like a sink or like a tub that you can put the pulp in and be able to pull sheets. So you need all that kind of equipment, but then you also need a press to be able to press the water back out and bond the fibers back together while it's wet. And then you need somewhere to dry them, and then put them back in the press so they're flat, they're dry. It's quite the long process. And so I'd had this list over my desk since I graduated college. And I like went on to the papermaking supplier that I loved, looking at all their stuff, and occasionally would order a bucket of pulp to like make stuff in the basement or whatever. But I had this whole list that like someday when I can afford it, these are all the things I'm going to buy. And I saw this post with this email address and I was like, no way. Like you never see papermaking equipment available like that. Like Never. Maybe
Wow.
every once in a while you'll see somebody selling the machine and they're
Right.
like in Europe and you're like, there's no way I'm going to ship it here or whatever. And even then it's still really expensive. So I emailed them immediately in the middle of the night and I was like, hey, I've been trying to start a studio forever. I'm super, super, super interested. And up till this point, I hadn't been taking a paycheck. So every single dollar that I'd made off of art that I hadn't spent on supplies, I just kept it in my business bank account. So I had about, I don't know, 6-7 grand in there. And I was like, I got some cash. What you got? They sent me back almost immediately. She must have also been up in the middle of the night. She sent me the list of everything that they had available. And I could have put it right up next to that list that I had over my desk. Every
Wow.
single thing that I had on my list was on there, plus a whole bunch of other stuff, supplies, other materials, dried flowers. It was amazing. It was amazing. They even had
That is.
guillotine paper cutter and like they had a whole business making wedding invitations. And they were like, you know what? It's just too much for us. We bought it from someone else. And, we both have full-time jobs and we can't keep up with people who want us to buy stuff. And we're just not using it. We're not using it to its potential. And so I looked through the list and I looked through their pricing and I said, would you take 5 grand for all of it? And they said, yes.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And meanwhile, it's still in the middle of the night. So I'm like kicking my husband in the middle. I'm like, babe, wake up, wake up. And he's like, what? What, is everything okay with the baby? I'm like, the baby's sleeping. It's great. I found some paper making equipment. He's like, do I need to know about this right now?
Come on, woman's excited in the middle of the night.
Right? I was like, you do need to know about this right now. He's like, let's talk about it tomorrow. And all right, fine. So of course I didn't sleep at all. Like the rest of the night, I was like operating with being so excited. And so the next day they're like, okay, cool. We're in Indiana.
Oh.
Yeah. Wow. And I was like, well, shit, we're in New York.
Buffalo, New York.
Kind of far. Like, can't ship it. It's like huge amounts of equipment. And so I was like, babe, okay, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna rent a U-Haul and I'm gonna drive and I'm gonna like pump milk while I'm driving and like you stay here with the baby and I'm gonna go get all this stuff and I'm gonna bring it back. And he's like, that's gonna take you like 5 days.
Oh, wow.
Maybe it will. And he's like,
stay here with the baby. I like that one.
Go to work, and we had this big mortgage, so I was like, he can't take like 5 days off of work unpaid.
Right.
And so he was like, I have a better idea. He's like, I'll take 2 days off of work. I'll fly there, rent a truck, load it up, and I'll bring it back. And you stay here with the baby because I don't have to stop and pump milk every 2 hours. And then I won't be here with the screaming baby for 5 days using all the
There you go. That's
and I was like, okay. I was so bummed that like I wasn't going to be able to go and like meet the people and talk to them and see it for myself. But I was like, this just makes more sense. So he went all the way there and got all the equipment and he brought it all back. And then we hired a plumber to install the plumbing and sinks and stuff in the basement that I would need. And he moved it all out of the truck into the basement, returned the truck. And I said, take this baby. I'm going to go make paper.
Oh, wow. That's great. What a great team you guys make.
Serendipity. Just
now, you remind it actually you're reminding me of you told a story about, and I know you got an award for manufacturing, but you shared a story in our storytelling group about you got a really large order. Tell me about that one again. That was like the best story. When you told that story, it's like, okay, I got to stay in touch with this chick because she's pretty cool.
So this is like extra weird. It's 2021. Somehow my luxury event business not only survived COVID 2020, but we tripled our revenue in 2020.
Wow.
By changing our marketing away from weddings and moving over to doing like corporate orders and corporate swag and custom gifts to like help people stay connected when they couldn't be close together. It was a great move. It did great.
Nice. And you have beautiful things on your website. Sorry, but
thank you.
Amazing.
And so this is also just a plug that like SEO works. Do it. Spend all the time putting all the words on every single page of your website. Like if you could do anything, like make sure every single page has at least 500 words on it. Every single page. Like it
Wow,
will
that's good to know.
100% bring more traffic to your website than for free than anything else you could do. Um, so I started adding all this stuff to my website about all these corporate gifting and custom gifting and seed bombs and things like that they were making. For people who don't know, seed bombs are recycled paper. They have seeds embedded right in them, and you dip them in water and you plant them and they grow. And I had been making them since, I don't even know, 2016, maybe 2017.
Yeah, yeah, and you have the best shapes, like, if you go on your website, people have to go look at the shapes you do, they're amazing.
They're really fun. They're really fun. So we had all of these on there, and we had all these pages about custom seed bombs and things like that. So I'm sitting there. I didn't realize at the time, but it was January. It was my mom's birthday again. So I'm sitting there at my desk. My assistant is sitting on the couch across from me. Well, I'm sitting in the same spot. Get a phone call, and they said, person on the phone said, "Would it be possible to make 500,000 of your seed bombs by March?"
Oh my god.
And my assistant is going, "No, no, 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 no. You're nuts. You have to say no to this." She's like miming at me from the couch. And I was like, well, define possible. How much money do you have? Because I was like, anything is possible if you got
That's
enough money.
great, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I was like, if our space isn't big enough and we need more people, like we could rent a space, we could get more people. There's
Look at
lots
you,
of
go
people out of
girl,
work right
that's
now. It's
right.
COVID.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess all my competitors must have just said, "Nah, you're crazy," because
You say yes.
my friend Paula just shared a video she made of the story. You got to watch that video. So when we're done, go watch that video.
Okay, and I'll post it too. Oh,
It's
I see your
great.
friend, yeah.
She made that amazing
Oh,
video. She's an amazing videographer
cool.
and producer. You should definitely check her out. Anyway, um, so yeah, they said, "Would it be possible?" I said, "Maybe." Um, and they said, we got a good budget. We need them. We need them. They didn't tell me why, but they're like, "We need them." And so can you send us the pricing? So I hang up the phone and I'm like, this is insane. Like, I gotta try, right? I gotta try to do this. And my
How large
assistant,
was the order?
well, at the time I wasn't sure because I was like, I don't know how much labor and materials and whatever it's going to cost us to make them, right? So my assistant and I immediately went in the basement and started making a bunch of samples and timing ourselves. And we're like, okay, well, if the two of us can make it, I think it was like 55 in 30 minutes or something like that. Like we each could do that. It was like, all right, so now we could say that an average schmo off the street who doesn't know what they're doing at all could maybe make like 30 in 30
Right,
minutes.
right.
I don't remember the exact ratio, but we figured out like if we know this much, this is about how much it would be for people who aren't skilled already doing it. Because it's not too difficult to teach
Yeah,
someone
yeah,
how to
yeah.
do it, but every single person who's coming in is never going to have done that before.
Have the same ability,
So
of course, yeah.
I was like, we're going to have to we're going to budget real high on labor and real high on materials because I'd rather have extra and, not need it.
Right.
So I was like, okay. So I budgeted it all out. I said, okay, well, if we can make this, if we have this many to make in a half an hour, how many people do we need? How many do we need to make each day? How many days do we need to work? How many days do we have between today and when they need them? How many seeds did we use? How much material did we use? We
Right.
weighed it all out and we figured it out. And I ended up calling my accountant and I said, "Hey, if I made 300 grand this year, how would that change my taxes?"
That's a good problem. So it's 300,000 was what they wanted to, that was their
Before I
budget
sent
for
them
it?
the bid, I was like, I just need to know like all of what are all of my costs. If I'm going to
That's
take this
good.
job, I'm not only am I going to have to say no to every other job that comes in my door for 2 months.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
have to
yeah.
factor in all of that lost revenue. But I was like, I'm going to need to hire all these people, but I also am going to need to hire someone to do HR for all these people because like I can't
Yeah.
be the scheduler and make sure that I onboard 70 plus people to do this, right? So I had to factor all of those costs in. So over the weekend, I don't think I slept at all, but I crunched all the numbers. I did the whole thing. I bidded it all out and I sent it to him and I was like, we could do it for this amount of money. And I was like, I just need to, like, if you want us to do it, I need to know today. that you need to do it because I need to start hiring people and buying materials and like
Wow.
prepping our space and we need to work today.
Look
Like,
at you. And you have a family at home.
it's also during COVID, and my older son was doing virtual school every day, and
Oh, older
my
son at this
3-year-old.
point in time. So how many children did you have at the time when this is going on?
I had 2 kids who were 5 and 3. And the 5-year-old had to do virtual school, and he has ADHD. So every day for at least 3 hours, I had to pin him into a chair and then hide off the camera so that, like you could see me making him do school every day. So not only did I have to I had to hire someone to do school, but I also had to have someone else watching my other son all day long while I was doing this for 2 months. But I bid it out and I sent it to them and I said, are we doing this? And 3 days later, I had $150,000 in my bank account.
Oof. Amen.
I
There
told
you
her,
go. That's
I was
great.
like, I can do it, but I need at least half the money up front because I need to be able to hire
Course.
people and buy equipment and pay people and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, I'm going to need that much in order to make sure that I have burn money for this.
100%. Yep.
And yeah, so within a couple of days, I had converted my company from a sole proprietorship to an LLC, opened a new bank account, did all the filings, did all that kind of stuff, had the money in there, hired this HR manager, put all these job postings out on social media, and contacted a staffing agency through the HR lady, and we started hiring a bunch of people. And I knew I was going to need like a really solid crew of people that I knew were already artists, who knew how to run in a studio, who knew how to work under crunch time, stuff like that.
Yeah, some kind of baseline
project to help me, like as kind of like my management team, because I had 2 assistants. They each worked 10 hours a week each when I got this job.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, both of you are getting promoted immediately. You're welcome. Okay, here's your fat raise. You can't quit. You cannot quit for the next 2 months at least.
Chained.
It's going to be insane. We're all going to work really hard, probably harder than we ever worked in our lives, but we're doing this. And they were like, I was like, are you in? And they're like, yes, let's do it. My one assistant really likes getting up early in the morning. And I was like, cool, you got the morning shift. Because I hate early morning and I had my kids. So I was like, all right. My other assistant, I had her as she was the pulp master. She was in charge of making paper pulp and running the crew of people who are going to make paper pulp all day long. Because I was like, if the pulp stops, the job stops, and we need it. Like,
right. That's great. And on your website, I don't know if is it Paula you said who's part of you. I see Paula here in the chat with the link for the seed bomb story, so people can go there and look at the process, which is just so cool.
Yeah, it was insane.
I want to make sure we have time for you to do your what you're going to share with us today. Talking about
I will. I have it right next to me. It's only going to take like 2 seconds. It's funny because
okay, all right, cool.
It's a nice little segue because it's actually going to make some seed bombs. But
awesome.
This job was so crazy, and we worked 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, from the minute I got that call until the day we delivered them.
Oof, what a high. That's a ride, man. That is a ride.
When I first was like getting all the paperwork together and setting up the LLC and like ordering all the equipment and doing all that stuff, my husband kept thinking of like, oh, well, what if this and what if this and what if this? And I just looked at him. I was like, I don't need that.
Zip. I know that's what I do.
I have enough of that in my head. I was like, all I need from you, I'm about to make your annual salary and profit in 2 months.
That's great. That's great.
Like, I need you to say, you're amazing. You're the best. You're totally going to make this deadline, and you're sexy, and I want to have sex with you every day.
There you go.
That's all I need from you. You need to take these things. I am not going to be doing the mom stuff. I'm not doing the school stuff. I'm not doing homework. I am not cooking dinner every night. I am not going to the store. I am not booking doctor's appointments. Like, that's on you. You are going to do this for the next 2 months because I can.
Awesome. That you answered my question. What did you give up? I didn't even have to ask it. Didn't give up sex. You gave up the house stuff.
You're gonna learn all the stuff that I do that you don't know that I do. And I was like, you're gonna have to figure out what they're gonna eat for dinner every day, and you're gonna have to bring some of it downstairs so I can eat it.
Nice.
I'm gonna be working.
That's a partner.
Pretend I'm out of town. Like, I'm not here.
You
And
sugar mama, you?
really hard. It was really hard, but we did it. We did
Yeah,
it. We
nice.
delivered them on the last possible day we could do it.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I always say, like, my girls are grown and they're married, and I've always said to them, "You need to be a partner with your husband." So whether you're picking up and you have things to do or he is, you need to be able to switch places, and that's a wonderful example of what you guys did for each other.
Okay, I'm gonna move my camera so you can kind of see. Can you kind of see it? You can't
Yeah,
see
I can
it.
see. Very cool, it looks like a meatloaf.
Make my chair a little shorter. Okay.
Looks like hamburger.
It does look like hamburger. Okay, so even funnier. Okay, so we have these seed bomb making kits that we call splurk, which is another funny story. But we make the paper pulp and then we press it lightly into these little hamburger shapes. And you can buy a set with 3 different colors and seeds and instructions. So if anybody wants to do this at home, you can.
And remember, Mother's Day, everything is coming up.
Yes.
So this is a great gift and something good to do with the kids. Oh, and another thing, if you have allergies, this is the way to go.
Yeah. Yes. So pretend that I took this and put a half a cup of hot water or warm water in it and let it sit for 5 minutes and then poked it with a fork. Okay. So then it looks like this. I have already mixed some seeds in here, so it's like ready to go. So what you do is you take some of it, and when we were doing the seed bomb job, all the ones we made were like round little balls. Like this. This one looks like a basketball because we made.
Oh yeah, look
We
how
made a bunch that
cool.
look
Oh
like
my
basketballs
goodness.
for
I would
everyone.
put that in my mouth. It looks like gum.
So yeah, we typically would use like a scoop that's like the size of like a tablespoon.
Okay.
But I don't have one of those with me. So I'm gonna put my towel over here because it's gonna drip. So you take it and you can't just like crush it, right? Because paper pulp is made of fibers, right?
Okay.
I don't know if you can see this. I'm gonna try not to drip it. Can you see that it looks like little fuzzy bits on the
Yeah,
edge?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
little hairs, right? So that's the paper fibers. They're like this. And
Okay.
when you put them in the beater or the blender and you chop them all apart, the fibers all split. You know, if you take a piece of paper and you fold it and you fold it and you fold it and it starts to get fuzzy along the seam and then you can tear it
Yes.
apart, that's all those fibers starting to split and come apart. So when you put the paper pulp into the machinery, it gets all the fibers all busted apart and they're all like kind of open, hanging out like this. When you press them back together, they go like this, and you press them and they bond and they stay that way
Oh,
until you
interesting. So we don't need glue or anything.
right.
Okay, wow.
But if you were to just take some of this and just crush it in your hand or squeeze it really, really, really hard, it sticks to itself in certain places, but it won't hold together and it kind of crumbles and falls apart.
Right, right, right.
You know, like if you're doing pie crust and it's too dry and it doesn't stick, it's like that.
Okay, all right.
So this is the one part of training all those 70 people of how to do this.
I was thinking about that.
Right? So every person has their own kind of method to what works best for how they were squeezing these out. For me, I find it easiest to squeeze it in my fingertips. So I had a whole ratio. I'd squeeze it 6 times, and then I would just kind of roll it around in my fingers a little bit and tuck all the little bumps in to make it round. They had to be all the same size for this job, and it shrinks when it dries. So we actually had little 1-inch like drawer pulls on every single person's station. So you had to make one and then compare it to the thing to make sure it wasn't too big or too small. Because we only had like a little bit of wiggle room on our variants of how big they could be.
Right. They remind me of little matzo balls. Like
if they were too big, they wouldn't dry and they wouldn't fit through the hole that they needed to go in for the final product, which actually is a piñata. They were put into piñatas that were given away at Lowe's all across the country for their spring garden giveaway.
Oh my God. So they had different piñatas and they put those inside there instead of candy? That's so cool.
I have one.
Oh, that's a great idea.
So they put them in this piñata.
Oh.
And you can see it has like the Lowe's garden giveaway kit
I
tag
love
on it,
it.
which is really cool. I didn't know while we were making all of them, I didn't know that that's what that the company that hired us had a contract with Lowe's for that. I didn't know because they
Oh,
weren't.
you didn't know that they were gonna take those and put them in the piñata?
I knew they were going in a pinata, but I had no idea why. And
Oh.
I didn't know that their contract was with Lowe's until Lowe's started doing promo for their spring garden giveaways.
Is that
And people kept
crazy?
seeing their Lowe's posts on social media and saying, "Is this you? Is this you?" Because they recognized the seed bombs in the picture.
Look how smart. Now what paper are you using?
So for these are actually made out of just like recycled office paper.
Oh, okay.
Like flyers, we have a big stock because once people found out that we take recycled material, they're like, "Oh, I have all these flyers from a church or a school or whatever, or my dissertation or whatever, like
Yeah,
all
this is
this
what I was gonna
paper."
ask. For the recycling, where are you getting all the materials? Huh.
Yeah, so I was on the news a couple times saying that we make things out of recycled material, so people started calling us up and saying, "Hey, can you use this? Hey, can you use this?" And sometimes I say yes, and sometimes I'm like, "No, that's too much." Um,
Oh, wow, that's a good
so
problem.
yeah, my assistant Lori, she was the seed bomb master, the early morning shift, and she kept the ship righted early in the morning and made sure that all the people making seed bombs before I got to there were on point and doing what they needed to do. She's also like the organizer of the studio, so
Nice.
she got to do all that stuff, but she sorted out all of the paper that I had in the basement because I had it in like a giant pile of boxes of papers and they were not like sorted by color or anything like that. She went through
Oh, wow, what a saint, man. What a
every
saint.
single bag, sorted it all out. So if somebody says we need pink, she pulls out what we got that's pink. If somebody say needed 500,000 seed bombs and they all needed to be the same color, obviously we can't source that much, post-consumer recycled paper like that. So when you get a basket raffle,
Yes.
that like crinkly paper,
Yeah.
we make them out of those.
Oh,
So
okay,
if they need to
cool.
all be the same material and all the same color or all the same shade, or you need a huge amount of them or something like that, we use that so that we don't need to add any additional pigment and stuff like that. And all of those shreddies, the ones that we source anyway, are made in the U.S. They're already made out of post-consumer recycled material. They're non-toxic colors and non-toxic.
Nice, nice.
So we use those and we make little seed bombs like this.
So how long do you let those dry for?
Depends how many you're drying at a time. If I just made a tray of 100 of these, they'd be dry in by tomorrow. We have all these racks that you'll see in Paula's video.
In the videos, yeah.
Yeah, that we dried them all
Cool.
on these racks. We have these huge. Initially, they were print drying racks, and we put screen over the top of them so that we could put seed bombs on them and it wouldn't fall through the big holes that are in it.
Oh, okay.
So more creative problem solving, right? Like all the
More
artists
and
got
more,
together
more.
and
Yeah,
said,
I
"What's the
have to
best way
get
to
some
do
of
this?"
these for the grandkids. This is
So
great.
much
I love it.
genius. We had so much genius on our team, and just working with. I mean, our entire pulp crew was women and non-binary people. That's it. Boss ass bitches. Like we were
Who
all
can
like,
bust balls?
right. We were hefting
That's
like
great. I love it.
buckets full of water, full of pulp, up and down the stairs, like 10, 12 hours a day, like just boss.
Nice.
And
Nice.
just so much genius, so many
Nice.
amazing ideas and collaboration. And there was like no cattiness and no one was fighting. It was like summer camp. We were like laughing
Nice.
hysterical because we were just like slap happy all the time. And it was so much fun.
Oh,
It was
that's great. That's like when I ride motorcycles with I ride with all guys. It's like everyone's just that way. They're all just like, let's have fun. uh, so one other thing, do you have any, when I was thinking about allergies, you make the most beautiful flowers. I don't know if you have any there, right there to show us, but
I do.
your
I have one.
flowers are beautiful. And I know
Mhm.
there's certain flowers that I love, and if I bring too many in the house, I'm like, my eyes are all buggy. Look at that. Look at that. Amazing.
I had to bust this one out because I don't know. about where you are, but in Western New York, the magnolias are just starting
Yeah,
to come out right
I
now.
love magnolias. They are. That is my favorite.
Pink. It's pink on the
Look at
back.
that. Look at that.
But it's funny because like some of these leaves are real and some of them are not, and you can't tell which ones are which.
Oh, interesting. So how do you keep them alive? How do you keep them green?
Oh, they're dry.
Oh, they're
They're dried.
dried.
These ones are fake. These ones are real, and these ones are fake.
I love it. I
I
mean,
just
what
somebody gave us a bouquet, and I was like, "Oh, perfect." I could. You can't even tell. I'm here looking at them, and like I can barely even tell which ones are real.
yeah, so do you get a lot of people for weddings or,
Yeah,
I
we
guess
get a lot
corporate
of
events?
yeah, we get a lot of stuff for weddings and like custom gifts, Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, Christmas gifts, and memorial gifts. Like we get a lot of memorial orders. And I mean, I
I
know
could
we're
see.
probably out of time at this point, but like honestly, I started this business in the middle of literal like grief and ashes, right? Like, how do you come back to life when you think you're gonna die?
Yes. Yep.
And as soon as COVID happened, I was like, this is my sweet spot, right? Like I know exactly how to help people who
Mm,
are really feeling hopeless about the way the world is. And I was like, hey, it might suck right now, but we're really far apart, but we have each other and we can celebrate each other. And if we lose people, we can celebrate them. We can tell their stories. We can keep doing that. And I ended up, I made so many flowers for Mother's Day during COVID that I had blisters on my fingers from my scissors.
oh,
And like, I made flowers for funerals that could only have 2 people there.
oh,
And
wow.
there were so many
Wow.
people who bought flowers that they could have at the funeral, but then they could save them for
Mm,
however long it took until their family could actually all come together. A year, 2 years. So we did a lot of that. We did some where we made big arrangements for the funeral and then they brought it back to us and we took them all apart and we made a bunch of small arrangements and shipped them all over the country so that everybody
oh,
could have some.
beautiful.
And we
Oh,
could do stuff like
beautiful.
that. And so it's like, it's not just as someone who's lost a lot of people in my life, right? I
Yeah,
just
and
lost my dad.
your dad recently passed away too, right?
Yeah, right after Christmas, like day and a half after Christmas. Um, and so I mean, I've lost my brother died in 2008 of cancer, and I mean between when my mom died and when my dad died, like all of my grandparents also died, all in that span of time, and my family structure is crazy. So I had a lot of grandparents. I had 5 parents, and all of their parents are now dead. So
Mm,
I've had a lot of funerals, a lot of grief, right? And people always love to get funeral flowers because it's easy. You're like, oh, I'm gonna get the biggest one, right? But then after the funeral, you're sitting there in your house
yeah.
with a bajillion flower arrangements that are all getting moldy and decaying and falling apart.
Dying. Yes,
They're all
yes.
dying all around you, and it's just something else that
It's
you
so
have to
sad.
take care of, and something else that you have to think about and spend mental energy on, and something else that you have to see wilt away and throw it out. And it's so sad, and
Yeah.
it's like people don't quite realize how much of a burden that can be on someone who's grieving.
Mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
and so I think
Mm.
being able to make flowers that, sure, you could get somebody a bouquet of acrylic flowers or silk flowers or whatever, polyester flowers. That's what they're really made out of,
Right.
plastic. You could get somebody one of those, but it's so impersonal, right? You're like, yeah, they
Yeah.
last forever, but you could tell that they're fake, right?
Y
Like, they're
yeah,
not
and
special.
yeah, and, when they talk about green funerals, like, what you do is perfect. Some people will take the ashes and put them to be part of growing a tree. For
Mhm.
your seed bombs, they could be a way to, start a new garden. It's a beautiful way to have, green and legacy.
Exactly.
moving
And we've done
forward.
stuff for some really, really difficult situations. Like we had a client who had multiple miscarriages, and
Mm,
she was like, I need some way to honor my babies and to remember that they were real and to
yeah.
not sweep this under the rug. And we made her a special batch of paper that she could bury with her babies
Oh, that's beautiful.
and like grow actual flowers where her babies' graves are. And I was like, I'm honored. I'm honored to help
Oh,
someone
yeah,
figure out how to come back to life after that. You know, like
definitely
what else is there in life? You know, like if you're out there as an
beautiful.
artist and you're like, I'm gonna make $1 million, whatever. It's not about that. It's not about that. It's about helping people connect and communicate and celebrate.
Yeah,
That's all we
that's
can
a
do in this
beautiful thing
world.
that you do.
And you know,
It is.
while those projects are hard, like I would give me one of those projects every day.
Oh, well,
Hey,
thank you so
like,
much. I mean, you're so inspiring and your insights along with it. And I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us here today. And I hope that you can see that what Janna is creating here is just not only wonderful for the environment, but creates just a wonderful legacy and a season of renewal. It reminds me also that we have here in Connecticut, we're having a grief conference, and the first one in Connecticut. So I'll be there. But just it's such a good reminder, Jenna, how different ways we carry our grief and different ways that we can dig deep and still find room for growth. So thank you for helping us appreciate these difficult moments more and more deeply too.
exactly.
So,
So, you know,
yeah,
life's gonna rain. It's gonna rain. In
e
everybody's life, it's gonna rain and it's gonna storm and it's gonna suck. And you gotta grow flowers because otherwise you live in the mud.
amen. And we can help each other. That reminds me of, we can help each other, but and hand out our hand, but we can't get stuck in the mud,
Exactly.
or we won't be able to help other people. I know when I speak to groups or help people, I'm like, "I can help you, but you have to want to help."
Exactly.
Yourself, and I can't you can't be stuck in the hole. Um, but yeah, I'm glad we met through that storytelling group. That was the one time, and you're just great. But it was so good to have you here today and
Thank
help us
you.
all learn how to grow through our trials and tribulations and some of the traumatic things that go on in our lives to help us continue to grow and find a different type of resilience, um, and work our world around that. But thank you, everyone. Take a look at Jenna's website I have here and think about Mother's Day is coming up, right? We're in spring.
Yeah,
Think about her flowers for those of you that have allergies, right? It's a beautiful thing. I know that you can have a bunch of them near you and
we
you won't
also
have
do we make paper out of fresh flower petals too. So if all y'all who love those fresh flowers and just want to have them, you can send them to us and we will dry them and make paper for you out of them too.
Oh, wow, that's so cool. I've never heard of that either. Awesome.
I'll share that out on my LinkedIn this week. I'll put it out there.
Okay. Yeah, and you can put it in we'll put it in the comment section here too. But thank you so much, Jenna, for being here.
Thank you
And
for
we will keep
having
in
me.
touch, my friend.
Yes, for sure.
All right. Well, next time I'm around Buffalo, I'll be stopping in.
Yeah, it's cool here.
All right. Oh, okay. All right. Take care.
Bye.